My next guest is Dr. Lisa Campbell. Dr. Campbell is the author of Grow With Me, a book in which she shares her journey of resilience and perseverance. As a devoted mother to her special needs daughter, Jasmine, Dr. Campbell intimately understands the power of resilience firsthand. As a motivator, she draws on her experience to inspire others to achieve personal and professional growth. Through engaging presentations and sessions worldwide, she shares her expertise guiding individuals and organizations towards success. Dr. Campbell's unwavering dedication shines through in both her work and her mission to empower others. Listen to Dr. Campbell and I from episode 42 of Special Needs Mom's Circle of Strength podcast, how we discuss the option that she and her family chose.
So Jasmine was in what was known as an early intervention program. So after we got the diagnosis at 3, the social worker said you should enroll Jasmine in a early, what do they call it? Early intervention program.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enrolled her, and she was almost at 5. And I remember the social worker there saying, I think Jasmine would benefit from moving to a residential facility. So just like, any mother would do, you seek out advice. And honestly, I got a lot of individuals that said to me, "Are you crazy? African Americans don't send their family members to live in a residential facility. We just figure it out." And so I had to really reflect on what was best for Jasmine as opposed to what was best for me. At that time, she was not walking. She was still drinking out of a bottle. And so I made an intentional decision that this move was for her and not for me. And I will tell you, looking back on it, it has served her so well because she gets the care that she needs. But I was also allowed an opportunity to grow so that I would be able to take care of her needs as long as I'm on this earth. And I don't think that I would have been able to grow as fast if I didn't let her go.
I'm just letting our audience just take a pause, just take a beat for a minute and just let that sink in. So I love that you brought up that this was a decision not just for you. This was a decision, and it wasn't about you. This was about Jasmine and what was best for her. So was it easy to come to that decision, Dr. Campbell?
No. In fact, and I'll never forget this, the day that I went to drop her off, we were inside. I'll never forget. It was a very nice place. And there was this minister, Wanda. And I said to her, "I cannot leave my baby here. We're leaving." And so she said to me, "Mom, Jasmine is going to be fine. We're going to take good care of her." But then she also told me that I could not come back for a couple of weeks to give Jasmine an opportunity to adjust. And so I said to her, "Oh no, we're leaving," right? And so after some time, I made the decision that, okay, she can stay. And I got in my car. That was probably one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. Not even buying a house, right? It was just the decision that I was going to leave my daughter in the care of strangers. And it wasn't like the facility was down the street. It was 30 to 35 minutes away from my home.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so it wasn't like I could just walk down the block and go see her, right?
Right.
But we made it.
So how is Jasmine doing since you left her in the home? And how old was she when you left her, by the way?
So she was 7,
Oh, wow.
and that was actually the first residential facility. A few years later, we were told, Jasmine's getting a lot more active than she was when you dropped her off, and we think she would benefit from this other facility, which, let me tell you, was 2.5 hours from our home. And so I moved her to that facility, And probably after a year, I was like, this is too far
Mhm.
because part of my visits with her were spent picking her up and then dropping her back off. And so that cut off, some of the time that we had. So
Mhm.
then she moved to another place where she stayed until she aged out, which was amazing. And so today she's happy. She's in control of what she wants to do, what she doesn't want to do. And one of the things that I find that's very interesting is that she's very clear on what
Mm.
she does and does not want to do and shows no emotion about it either way, right? It's like Jasmine's way or no way. I don't know where she gets that from.
Can't think for a minute. Wow, wow. So 3 moves, and she transitioned fairly well.
You know what? That's what made the transitions easier because she transitioned, right? She
Mhm.
just she just moved into the new space. As long as she got food, as long as she has her own room. That's the other thing. Jasmine
Mhm.
does not like to share a room. And so that second place that she went to, she had to share a room. And so that kind of made it a little, more challenging for them to deal with her from a behavioral perspective. And so, but now everybody knows Jasmine does not share a room.
All right, Jasmine, you go, girl. And that's one of the things I found with my daughter as well, knows her own mind, knows her own mind, and she will let you know. She's also on the spectrum, so she's cerebral palsy, but she also is on the spectrum, not officially diagnosed, but when we look at her clinically, she presents. And so
What?
that's
Oh my goodness. So that's another similarity because Jasmine was never diagnosed, but she has been in an autism study since she was 5. She's in this longitudinal study
Mhm.
and she exhibits the characteristics of autism.
Isn't that something? Wow.
Mhm.
So, just for our audience, a preamble before we started to record, Dr. Campbell and I was just sharing with her that my maiden name is actually Campbell. And I am also a medical professional. I am working as a physical therapist as well as doing my other work as a coach and a podcaster. And my niece is named Jasmine. And that was actually one of the names that we had chosen for one of our daughters, but my sister picked it up before I had an opportunity. So, and now we know that our daughters both are on the spectrum. Isn't that something?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I love the fact that you've been able to figure out a housing solution that works for you and your family. And that's obviously Jasmine is thriving and sounds like she's doing amazing. During my conversation with Dr. Campbell, I shared what my husband and I have done for our 2 children with disabilities. Listen to the options we created. Wow, wow. I'm just processing because it's bringing up some emotion for me as well. Our oldest is now 22, which is hard to believe. I'm the mother of 2 adults. Oh my goodness. And I have shared this before, so to our regular listeners, bear with me. I had to make a decision, my husband and I. So my husband and I have been married 32 years coming up next month. And we
Nice.
had to make a decision about Melody Ann's care. So Melody Ann is our oldest, and she is total care. So we had a prolapsed cord, which cut off the oxygen supply to Melody Ann's brain. So her brain was basically dying when she was born. They managed to resuscitate her. And so, as I mentioned, this was the preamble for those that, if I didn't say it earlier, Melody Ann was only given a year to live, but she's here, praise God. So, long story short, when Melody Ann became 15 or so, we had a caregiver that was with us for 6.5 years, and then she decided to move on. So we were then left with a decision to make. Do we bring in more help into the home? And for those of us that have done the in-home help, it's wonderful. It works great. But then if they decide to leave, then you're basically starting all over again. And so this young lady decided to leave, and we had to make a decision. Do we continue on the same pattern or do we look for a longer term solution? So that's what we did. And so we actually ended up, our house was wheelchair accessible. And so we moved out, my husband and I and our youngest daughter, and we left our oldest in the home. And we had two other young ladies with disabilities move in, and we had an agency provide 24-hour care. So I hear you when you say the hardest decision you had to make to leave your child in the care of strangers, because that was not easy. And the fact that Melody Ann was not even 16 yet, she was almost 16 when we left her, was very, very tough. I'm abandoning my child. I just felt like the worst mother in the world. How would I do this? Also, Caribbean descent. We take care of our own. So what was I thinking? And it was a really, really hard decision. And it was ages, it was months before I could even start to really process what was going on. But praise God, this child of ours, because she was in her own home, she was able to transition real early with regards to us moving out. She was fine. She was in her same room, in her same home, with four caregivers that were taken on by the agency to take care of her. So it made the transition for her really easy. As I say, it wasn't that easy for Scott and I. But she, as you had said with your daughter Jasmine, thrived. My daughter is thriving too. She is talking up a storm with a communication device way more than she would if we were still with her. And the fact that she's had to learn empathy, she's had to learn to share, she's had to learn to take turns, she's had to learn to say sorry when she's told one of the other young ladies to go to her room. So just that independence has just been so beautiful to see. And one other thing that we have done for our youngest daughter, who has ADHD, and we found out 2 years ago is high on the spectrum, i.e., high functioning on the spectrum. And so in our home, we have a basement suite that we've just created, and it's beautiful. And we created it as a separate, sort of on its own legal suite. And that was for our youngest. Unfortunately, they're not ready to move in yet because the executive functioning is about 3 years behind. So they're not ready to kind of make life on their own, even though the idea was to have a mentor be there with them and just kind of help make sure they were taking the medications, make sure they had decent food in the home, they were keeping it fairly tidy. This child is a teenager, so my expectations have been lowered.
Some
But
things
we
don't change, right?
Yes. And so at this moment in time, they're not ready, but the suite will be there. We are currently renting it to a Christian couple that just got married. And so they're very excited to make this their first home. So they have committed to being in our home for a year. So my hope and prayer is that by this time, within a year or two, that our youngest will be ready to move in and have some independence, and still will be there, not to kind of stand over them, but to offer support as needed. Just kind of keep that scaffold and just back off as we need to. That's our hope and prayer. Yeah. Our youngest is still not ready to transition, but I am thrilled to report growth is happening. Responsibility is occurring. Independence is flourishing. Skills are developing. There is hope. Today, we've listened to mums who have shared several different options for a forever home. We had Cheryl share about apartment living with support for her two boys. We heard from Dr. Lisa Campbell about the facility her daughter lives in. And you heard from me, your host, and the two solutions my husband and I have created for our children. I hope today's episode has given you insight, inspiration, and encouragement as you think about creating a forever home for your child. Every journey looks different, but what matters most is that we take intentional steps towards building a future where our children can live with dignity, independence, and support. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love for you to share it with another parent, family member, or caregiver who could benefit from what we've discussed. And if you're ready to start planning your child's forever home, but not sure where to begin, I invite you to connect with me. I'm happy to brainstorm with you. You can also sign up for my monthly newsletter where I share things to consider when exploring a forever home for your child. Drop your email and I'd be glad to send it to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time. Till then, remember, live with intention, embrace the journey.